Here's something very interesting from the allnewspipeline.com, where there's a massive cover-up in progress. The hate crime hoaxer Jussie Smollett case file disappears from record systems as enraged Chicago PD rushes to release case file before judge sealed the case. Kind of a segment I'm just going to throw in there this week, and this is talking about an article from strangesounds.org, and it says, let's talk about food shortage. U.S. grain bins collapse under catastrophic Iowa floods.
From the land of Israel, we've been friends for 20 years. Bruce Brill, formerly he lived in the United States for a while, got fed up with some of the politics and moved to Israel. I'm happy he did. He's what is called one of the real pioneers.
Trumping the Golan. This week has been exciting news because President Trump has declared sovereignty in the Golan for Israel. That has never happened in the history since 1967, when the Golan Heights were taken from Syria because of the 6-day war that Israel had with its Arab neighbors.
Well, what would Four Corner News be without the Beast News that we talk about every week here? And this time around, just something that we've kind of mentioned in the past, but it also has to do with artificial intelligence. The article is, AI can hate with no human input. We need to know what is actually going on in our culture. This is not just an isolated incident, but here is the article. Mom ignores doctor when her sick 2-year-old starts feeling better. Child Services sent a SWAT team.
If you watch movies, you need to know about the Motion Picture Association of America and their ratings. You need to know what the ratings stand for and then how they rate them.
Yes, on the religion news front, what do we got going on? Well, in Pennsylvania, there's a Muslim lawmaker said prayer in the name of Jesus is Islamophobic. On a good note, here in the health news, I like this article, anti-cancer food. Jalapenos strip away the defenses of cancer cells. I like that.
Isaiah 11:12 says, he shall set up an ensign for the nations and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. When the outcasts of Israel are assembled and the dispersed of Judah have been gathered, we will bring you that story. In the meantime, or until then, the Lamb Network will gather news from these same four corners and bring them to you all with a messianic perspective, all from messianic believers. Shalom and welcome to Lamb's Network's Four Corners Weekly News. I'm Rabbi Darryl Weinberg, and thank you for joining us. This episode, we will cover events that took place around this planet through March 28, 2019, and here are those stories. Starting with the news in the United States, apparently there is a massive cover-up in progress. Wow, I'm sure this is the first time that that's happened. Hate crime hoaxer Jussie Smollett's case file disappeared from the Chicago PD record system, right before the Chicago PD was set to release these files, before the judge sealed the case. Here's John Craig to give us the scoop. John?
Thanks, Darryl. On the national news front, here's something very interesting from the allnewspipeline.com, where there's a massive cover-up in progress. The hate crime hoaxer Jussie Smollett case file disappears from record systems as enraged Chicago PD rushes to release case file before judge sealed the case. Yep, this is Chicago style of justice, and this article is by Susan Duclos over at All News Pipeline. Basically what's going on, if you've been following the Jussie Smollett fiasco and attempt to divide the nation with creating hate crime riots, well, This is the latest in the drama that's been going on. The Chicago Police Department had Jesse Smollett dead to rights. Their investigation done by the book, leading to his arrest and being charged on 16 counts of felony disorderly conduct charges for filing a false police report claiming he was a victim of a hate crime by two men that yelled, "This is MAGA country." Well, on Tuesday, March 26, 2019, prosecutors abruptly dropped all charges against Smollett, which has the Chicago PD and Mayor Rahm Emanuel up in arms, questioning the injustice of what is happening. Yeah, did you ever think about that? Going on there in Chicago, they still want justice. As they pushed to drop charges, prosecutors also took the very unusual step of getting a judge to seal his records. And despite that, the Chicago PD did respond to a Freedom of Information request, that is a FOIA request, and released their complete investigative file on Smollett's arrest to CBW Chicago, who has then published these records online immediately before prosecutors convinced the judge to broaden the seal to include PD records, police department records. Oh my goodness, they are so enraged, that is the police department, so enraged that they spent hundreds of man-hours building an airtight case just to see the Chicago State Attorney to let Jesse Smollett walk away scot-free. Yeah. What is going on with that? Well, if you kind of been following the story like I have, one of the things I do know is that there has been a very high-powered attorney connected to the Obamas that seemed to just show up on the scene after Jesse Smollett's arrest. Seems to have been an influencer in all of this. So how can a person that's gone out there, created an entire scene, hired, paid, wrote the checks out, they've got the checks in hands, they even have the magazines that these two instigators, so to speak, that were in cahoots with Jesse Smollett, they had the magazines where they cut out all of the letters and they sent this hate crime type of hoax letter through the U.S. Postal Service, talking about all these different things. They even have those magazines where they cut it out. Got them dead to rights. They have all of the investigative footage. They have all of the cameras and all of the raw footage that showed how this was put together. They have these two Nigerians where they went out and bought the bleach, the rope, and all that from the local Ace hardware store. They have all of this information. It's now been released. It has now been made public. But Jesse Smollett gets off. He just lost his $10,000 bail. According to the article here, it says, is it any wonder that everyone from the Chicago PD Superintendent Eddie Johnson to the Mayor Rahm Emanuel are calling this a whitewash of justice while slamming the prosecutors? The Chicago mayor stood shoulder to shoulder with his city's police force Tuesday afternoon, denouncing prosecutors for dropping charges against Empire star Jesse Smollett and slamming the episode as a whitewash of justice. Going on, it says here, Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson and Emanuel said they were not only furious with the outcome of Tuesday's surprise hearing, but also blindsided by the decision itself, with the officials only learning Smollett wouldn't face charges for allegedly faking a hate crime at the time the public found out. Where is the accountability in the system? You cannot have, because of a person's position, one set of rules applies to them and another set of rules apply to everyone else, Emanuel said. Our officers did hard work, day in and out, countless hours working to unwind what actually happened that night. The city saw its reputation dragged through the mud. It's not just the officers' work, but the work of the grand jury that made a decision based on only a sliver of the evidence presented. Because of the judge's decision, none of that evidence will ever be made public. So they've sealed the case. They're expunging his record and apparently are trying to bury any and all information about his crime, which is possibly why the Fraternal Order of Police is demanding a federal investigation to Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx's interference in this case, according to Chicago Sun-Times, according to some other reports, is that this state attorney has been under investigation for quite some time because of the miscarriage of justice that she's been involved in. So these are some things that are continuing to unfold in this saga. By the way, if you continually follow the story, looks like Jussie Smollett has been disinvited from the next season of Empire. So guess he didn't quite fulfill his role. They've also come to find out, as this thing is unraveled, and I'm sure we're going to see this in the future, a little bit more about how some of the executives of Empire may have put Jussie Smollett up to this, needing to bolster some of their sagging ratings. And after all, now that Disney's taken over the Fox Corporation, maybe there's going to be some changes going on. I don't know. Those are some things that I'm looking at, some things that need to be considered. I mean, the bottom line is this: hate crimes are loathsome. I agree with that. That's what the article says, but faking them is insidious and shouldn't be excused. And after all, this person, Jussie Smollett, could have caused some serious damage across the nation. You know, I guess it's a good thing that most of the nation is apathetic, maybe because they're a little dumbed down from the fluoride in the water. Who knows what's going on with that? But I guess this publicity stunt from Empire, or for Empire, has it backfired? I mean, after all this, people know about Empire. I've never seen it. Don't want to watch it now, for sure. Not because of who's in it, just because there's an entire fiasco that's going on. You know, if this is the quality of actors that are out there, of course, you know, look at what's going on in Hollywood and the stuff we've seen for the last couple of years since President Trump's been in office. There's a lot of actors I don't want to see their movies anymore. Well, some other things going on here is I guess Mr. Smollett needs to watch his back. If he didn't fulfill his obligations and making sure he pulled the Oscar-winning type of act that he needed to carry out, maybe he needs to be watching his back. Maybe those two Nigerians that he colluded with to bring about this so-called hate crime need to be his bodyguards, because I would really be concerned with maybe, I don't even want to say it, but there's been a lot of people that have just kind of showed up in a really bad place, possibly Arkansided because of doing the wrong thing. I don't know. Those are just some of my thoughts on it. There's just, you just don't want to mess with those type of people in those type of places. So, well, I better stop now before I get myself more in trouble. Anyway, that's it for some national news. This is a story that we want to keep on following. Back to you, Darryl.
It seems that we have a lot of double category news today. Here's another story in U.S. news. Otters are causing havoc in some Midwestern states: Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Nebraska. Floods in these states have resulted in an estimated $3 billion in damages so far. Here's John Craig with the story.
Well, thanks, Rabbi. We've got some prepper news. At least that's what I'm calling it this time. Kind of a segment I'm just going to throw in there this week. And this is talking about an article from strangesounds.org. And it says, let's talk about food shortage. U.S. grain bins collapse under catastrophic Iowa floods. Well, what we've got going on, if you've been paying attention to the news, well, after millions of dead calves in Nebraska, now thousands of tons of grain lost in Iowa. Floodwaters are causing havoc in some of the Midwestern states: Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Nebraska, and have resulted in an estimated $3 billion in damages so far. And out there. There's a bunch of videos about how these floods are devastating some of these silos. In fact, rising water levels have breached levees along the Missouri River and forced several towns to evacuate. It's also reported that in the state of Nebraska, that's west of Iowa, the flooding has already caused more than $1 billion in damages there, with more than 2,000 homes and 340 businesses lost. In Missouri, in a separate incident, a grain bin, which was reportedly holding 21,591 tons, or that's 850,000 bushels of corn, collapsed in the state of Missouri in the early hours of Monday, March 11. And the grain was washed into a nearby road and also blocked a railway line once its container wall split. No one was injured, but this is just some things that's been happening out there. I think it's time that they're talking about some soaring food prices coming up in our near future, if we haven't already seen those futures already taking effect in our grocery stores, as grain prices, different things that are being held in those silos, the corn, the wheat. Also with the beef, this is time to stock up, be prepared, get ready, get those long-term food storage ready to go. If you don't have any, this is the time to go ahead and invest in that. Some of the articles I've been reading about the prior floods in the past. There's some great floods that took place early on in the 20th century, and it took 2 years to recover from that. So not sure how this is going to go, but they're already talking that the flood waters will take a little bit of time to recede, and by the time the water goes down, it could certainly affect the crops and what's going to grow even this year, let alone it's that which is in those storage bins right now are used for food production for much of this year of 2019.
Thank you, John. Amy Louie has been talking with world-renowned author, historian, and musician Bruce Grill. In Israel, Bruce is always on top of every story. Here is Jamie's interview with Bruce Grill as they talk about the Golan Heights and the anti-Semitism of Ilhan Omar. Jamie?
From the land of Israel, we've been friends for 20 years. Bruce Grill, formerly he lived in the United States for a while, got fed up with some of the politics and moved to Israel. I'm happy he did. He's what is called one of the real pioneers. So Bruce, just recently, President Trump made sure that the world knew that Israel actually had rights as far as we were concerned, the United States of America, to the Golan Heights, the most important defensive part of Israel. Also, there's been quite a bit stir in our House of Representatives with the 2 Muslims that have joined, and I understand you wrote an op-ed about one of them and what they had said and tweeted. And I'd like to very quickly, because we only have a few minutes, have your opinion on both of these subjects in the news. Go ahead, Bruce.
Okay. Well, the Golan Heights, most people don't realize, was part of the original mandate, the original Palestine mandate of 1922, that the League of Nations recognized that the Jewish people have a historical connection to the land of Israel, which included the Golan Heights. Now, as far as Ilhan Omar, her accusation of Jews having dual loyalty, it's an accusation that makes Jews very uncomfortable because we've suffered this accusation for millennia. Going back to the time of the Pharaoh, you'll recall in the book of Exodus, in Exodus chapter 1, it says a new Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph came to power, and he said to his people, "The Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Let's deal shrewdly with them." For if war breaks out, they'll join our enemies, fight against us, and then leave the country. Accusation of dual loyalty. It wasn't true. The Nazis in Germany after World War I accused the Jews of Germany's defeat in World War I because of, again, dual loyalty. And the whole 2,000 years of Jews' diaspora, exile, Jews have been hounded and suffered inquisitions and pogroms and expulsions and put behind walls of ghettos because of this accusation of dual loyalty. Now, the question today with Ilhan Omar, she says that the Jews can buy support with money. And the question is, who has more monetary resources in the Arab-Israeli conflict? Could it be tiny Israel with a Jewish population of barely 6 million? Or could it be the Arab Muslim countries, oil-rich, many of them, with a population of not 6, but 400 million people? If Israel were to engage in a contest of let's buy support in the American Congress, why would they engage in such a contest that they're sure to lose? It's ridiculous.
It is. That's terrific, Bruce. Well, I understand OPAT has more information, but according to our time element, I'm going to make it available with my email that we'll send them a copy. And hopefully we'll get that published soon in the Jerusalem Post, and the world will know how Bruce Brill feels. So, Bruce, keep your ear to the ground, and we'll be back in touch with you in the near future to bring forth the Israeli and American joint news from a couple of brothers from other mothers. Okay?
Always a pleasure, Brother Jamie.
All right. See you soon.
Thank you, Jamie. Well, it looks as though Trump's been tweeting again. Go figure. By recognizing Israel's sovereignty in the Golan Heights, President Trump struck a blow against the idiotic principle of land for peace, which so far hasn't worked. Keeping up on Israeli news while living on U.S. soil, at least while they have to, here are James and AviGayle O'Hare.
Thank you, Darryl. Welcome to this week's Israel Update with your host, James O'Hare.
And I'm AviGayle O'Hare.
Trumping the Golan. This week has been exciting news because President Trump has declared sovereignty in the Golan for Israel. That has never happened in the history since 1967, when the Golan Heights were taken from Syria because of the 6-day war that Israel had with its Arab neighbors. This comes from the Israel Pundit, Trumping the Golan by Victor Rosenthal. I just want to read a little bit of it. By recognizing Israeli sovereignty in the Golan Heights, President Trump struck a blow against the idiotic principle for land for peace, quote unquote, when he tweeted, and quote on the tweet, "After 52 years, it is time for the United States to fully recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which is of critical strategic and security importance to the state of Israel and regional stability." What do you think about this, AviGayle?
I think it's another one of those land-breaking, awesome times in history. We are so blessed to have a president who is cognizant of the significance of Israel. The sovereignty of the Golan has such an impact, not only for Israel, but also for the United States of America. Because as we are friends with Israel, we are receiving the blessings from the Creator of heaven and earth. Because those are our brothers and sisters over there. Those are our companions over there. So it really is an amazing feat that President Trump did, trumping the Golan. Because, you know, the land is very, very important. You know, yes, the children of Israel, the land of Israel is just as important because it is the Father's property, and he did give it to the tribes of Yah as a refuge. So not to divide the land is a blessing. Because when we start talking about dividing the land, now we've crossed over into another area which will bring a curse and not a blessing.
In 1967, when Israel was much smaller than it is today, Egypt came against them, Jordan came against them, Syria came against them, Iraq came against them in the 6-Day War, and yet Israelis beat them back and took sovereignty over the Temple Mount, which was significant prophetically, and all of Jerusalem was reunited. But the Golan Heights is up on the northern border of where Syria is, and it's hills that overlook Israel. And what the Syrian people were doing, the Syrian dictators would be lobbing bombs and shooting rockets into Israel, into the towns that surrounded the Galilee. So it is very, very important strategically that Israel keep hold of this land. And I hope they even look at this as sovereign land.
I believe they do. I mean, you could sense it in Benjamin Netanyahu's message to the United States of America and to President Trump that this was a significant move on the part of the United States of America because it did give more power to defend Israel and to protect the civilians who are living in the land of Israel. It's all about preserving life. Amen. It's all about allowing the plan that the Father, the Creator of heaven and earth, has ordained. And the land is very, very significant concerning the future of Israel as well as our future.
Amen to that. That is awesome. We live in a great time. It's so many prophetic things are happening, and we're excited, and we're thankful that that the Father has raised up someone who, in the office of president, that would stand strong and be a friend with our brothers and sisters in Yehuda, Israel, and protect that land, protect the people. And not be backward about being forward.
Yes, it's time to pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Yes.
Without ceasing.
Amen. So that's your Israel update for this week from the Four Corners News Network. Thank you so much for listening. Back to you, Darryl.
Thank you to our beloved Bostonians. The vision and mission of the Besorah Institute is to help increase understanding among the members of the body of Messiah. We'll be right back after this message.
We did a survey at the end of the class, and the students were just so excited about the class. They said, we never knew all this stuff, and they just made the Bible come alive. There was just knowing from a Judeo-Christian perspective, why did Jesus say this, and why did the Pharisees, why were they acting like this? And they said it just really opened their minds, and they were so excited about the class.
And we had one guy, and when he came into the class, he was a little cynical, like, why do I even need to know this? But his wife wanted to come, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But it was just funny because halfway through the class, he goes, you know, I was in a men's Bible study, and I'm sitting here looking at this scripture we're supposed to read, and all I could think of was, wonder what this means in Hebrew. Wonder what was meant by this. What is the bigger application to this?
In our next story, here's a question. What if a robot decides it hates you? Well, that might seem like a silly question, but according to research, developing prejudice toward others does not require a high level of cognitive ability. Here's John Craig with the scoop.
Well, what would Four Corner News be without the Beast News that we talk about every week here? And this time around, just something that we've kind of mentioned in the past, but it also has to do with artificial intelligence. The article is, AI can hate with no human input. This was very interesting. This is from the organicprepper.com. And this article is relating to these robots. Can robots hate you? Well, that seems to be a silly question, but according to research, developing prejudice towards others does not require a high level of cognitive ability and could easily be exhibited by robots and other artificially intelligent machines. The study, conducted by computer science and psychology experts from Cardiff University and MIT, revealed that groups of autonomous machines could demonstrate prejudice by simply identifying, copying, and learning the behavior from each other. The findings were published in the journal Nature. Yeah, so I guess when the machines are talking to each other, they can develop their own prejudices. Isn't that interesting? And they form these prejudices much like humans. In a press release, the research team explained that while it may seem that human cognition would be required to form opinions and stereotype others, it appears that it is not the case. Prejudice does not seem to a human specified phenomenon. Just an interesting thing. This means that robots could be just as hateful as human beings can be. And since they're thousands of times smarter than us, can you imagine the future if they develop a bias against humanity? Makes me wonder if they can develop this hatefulness like humans can be. Can they also develop a kindness? What's their propensity? Makes you kind of wonder. Well, makes you kind of wonder what's connecting with the machine. Guidance from human is not needed for robots to learn to dislike certain people. However, this study showed that AI doesn't need provocation and inspiration from trolls to get it to exhibit prejudices. It's capable of forming them all by itself. Is there a fallen nature, by the way, that is within the AI? It makes me kind of wonder, can AI be demonized? Wonder if something can actually get in the middle of all those zeros and ones. Well, how about this? What will happen if developers and computer scientists can't figure out a way to keep AI unbiased? Last year, when Twitter was accused of shadow banning approximately 600,000 accounts, which they were, it wasn't just that they were accused, they were, and CEO Jack Dorsey discussed the challenges AI developers have in reducing accidental bias. Well, was the demon in the AI at that point in time? It was just kind of interesting that it just happened to be the conservative voices and the religious voices, those that had a biblical worldview. They were the ones that were being shadow banned, and actually they were the ones that were just simply removed from social media. But going on here, it says the risk of something seriously dangerous happening is in the 5-year time frame. 10 years at most. Please note that this is coming from the author of this article, I am normally super pro technology and have never raised this issue until recent months. This is not a case of crying wolf about something I don't understand. The pace of progress in artificial intelligence and he says, I'm not referring to narrow AI, is incredibly fast. Unless you have direct exposure to groups like DeepMind, you have no idea how fast it is. It is growing at a pace close to exponential. Well, in fact, Elon Musk warned us of the dangers of AI in the last several months. Several months ago, he actually came out, maybe it was last year sometime. He was saying, hey, this is really dangerous and we need to put the reins on this thing till we can get a handle on it. The leading AI companies have taken great steps to ensure safety. They recognize the danger, but believe that they can shape and control the digital superintelligences and prevent bad ones from escaping, get this, escaping into the internet. That remains to be unseen. I remember watching The Avengers, where you actually had, an evil AI that actually invaded the good AI and actually ended up inserting itself into the internet where it was difficult to track down. So, is it movies mimicking reality or reality mimicking movies? It's interesting. Something that Musk added, he said, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. So what do you think? A robot apocalypse straight out of the movie theater seemed to be approaching? What if robots form biases against certain groups of people or humanity overall? Well, I think they've made a few movies like that, and some things that we need to be looking out for. I think we need to be aware and not be lulled to sleep by the conveniences of computer technology. This is my thoughts on it. What about these voice command applications like Cortana and Siri? What about the things that Facebook has put out where you can put a camera in your room so that Facebook is always watching? You know, what about the microphone that's always on, listening to our conversations? It seems to beg the question, can AI be demonized? And what comes to mind is, remember the old Doctor Who movies and shows? And the Dalek, which would go around saying, exterminate, exterminate. Well, what did it want to do? Exterminate the humans on a whim. Could AI be misunderstood or under evil influence? Makes you wonder.
Thank you, John. When robots start hating us, we're really in trouble. And again, it looks like we're doubling up on some of our categories. This story fits into our Beast News category, Beast System News category, rather, but seems more like something out of the New World Order. SWAT teams are sent in by child services, and a mother ignores her doctor's orders after her child gets better. Good luck reporting this one without some editorial license. Here's John Craig.
Well, every parent and grandparent needs to be concerned about the New World Order news I wanted to bring up today. You might even call it the police state news or something like this. But this was very disconcerting when I read this. And I thought it was something I felt it's very important that we pass this on, because many of those that listen to this broadcast are parents. They're also grandparents. And we need to know what is actually going on in our culture. This is not just an isolated incident, but here is the article. Mom ignores doctor when her sick 2-year-old starts feeling better. Child Services sent a SWAT team. Yeah, this is from reason.com. And what about the parent's right to decide what's best for their child? Let me give you a background. Over in Chandler, Arizona, cops broke through the door of a family's home in the middle of the night, stormed in, pointed their guns, handcuffed the father, and watched as the state's Department of Child Safety, that's the DCS, took custody of the parent's 3 kids, all because mom had decided her toddler's fever was not serious enough to merit a trip to the hospital. I mean, after all, hospital trips, emergency rooms cost a lot of money. Well, here's the story and how it breaks down. It was dinner time on February 25th when the pregnant mother took her 2-year-old to the doctor with a fever of over 100. The doctor told her to take him to the emergency room, fearing that because the boy was unvaccinated, perhaps he had meningitis, a life-threatening disease. The doctor called the hospital to alert them, but by the time the mother and the child left his office, the boy was laughing and playing with his siblings. According to this excellent piece by Diana M. Nanez in the Arizona Republic, Mom took his temperature again, and it was almost normal. So instead of going to the emergency room, the family went home. Doesn't that seem reasonable? The mom called the doctor to say her boy's fever had broken and she wasn't going to go to the emergency room. The doctor told her she should go anyway. So she agreed she would, but then she didn't. That's when the madness began. The hospital called the doctor to tell him the toddler hadn't arrived. The doctor called DCS, and DCS requested the cops check on the family as a caseworker headed over. It's about 10:30 p.m. when the 2 officers knocked on the family's door. The officers heard someone coughing. Officer Tyler Cassio wrote in a police report that he knocked on the door several times, but no one answered. A neighbor approached the officers and police explained the situation. The woman said she knew her neighbor and that she was a good mother. At the request of officers, the neighbor called the mother and said police wanted to speak with her. The DCS caseworker arrived and updated police on the toddler's fever and the mother's choosing not to take her child to the hospital. We talk about some things getting a little blown out of proportion here. Well, this doesn't just stop you here. It gets even worse. The officer called the family's doctor, who repeated her recommendation that the mother take the child to the hospital. Guess someone's trying to watch their liability back. And at about 11:30 p.m., and that's, at the expense of the parents and of the child and this family and all of that. Whose interest is being looked out here? Is it because the doctor doesn't want to get any type of legal problem? And so we get this whole fiasco? Well, let's go on. At about 11:30 p.m., the caseworker informed officers that DCS planned to obtain a temporary custody notice from a judge to remove the child for emergency medical aid. Just after midnight, the caseworker got that notice, which is required by law. Matters subsequently escalated. Cassio wrote that officers consulted with Police Criminal Investigations Bureau and SWAT. Based upon the court order, the intent of DCS to serve the order and exigency to ensure, that is, in other words, to get the child out of there, to ensure the health and welfare of the child. The decision was made to force entry to the home of the parents if the parents refused to respond to verbal requests. According to police records, police knocked saying that they had a court order and would force entry if needed, according to the police records. And force they did. It was after 1 a.m. when officers kicked down the family's door. One officer carried a shield while another was described as having lethal coverage. Officers pointed guns, yelled, "Chandler Police Department," and entered the house. The rest of the story is equally nuts. Kids were all placed in separate foster homes. When the case got to juvenile court 10 days later, DCS requested it to be closed to the public. The judge refused, which I think is a good thing. But then it seemed as if DCS decided to make everything harder for the parents because now the press was interested. And some other organizations for family rights. Also, state legislature representative Kelly Townsend, Republican of Mesa, who helped write a law requiring DCS get a warrant before removing a child. He was lobbying zingers like, what about the parents' rights to decide what's best for their child? Parents felt the child was fine. Next thing we know, the Gestapo is at their door. Well, that's really what's happened. The children's grandparents are now undergoing a DCS review and hope to be permitted to temporarily shelter the kids once that's approved. But there's no telling how long it will be before the kids can just go home to mom and dad. I mean, after all, what about the whole legal defense? What about the cost that has now occurred? And then while these children have been out of mom and dad's custody, how many of them have been vaccinated when it was the choice of the parents say, we would prefer not to vaccinate, or at least hold off on vaccinations until they're safer, or until there's a certain point in time that they're old enough to be able to maybe withstand any type of harmful effects from the vaccinations. Proper, some comments on this, the proper reunification plan is, here's this. This is one comment that I actually read in this article, is jailing the DCS workers, putting the police officers on probation and sending fresh officers with the parents to pick up the kids from the foster homes. I mean, after all, how many foster homes, I'm not saying it happened in this situation, actually are an endangerment to children? It's a little bit more serious than is often thought, and many of these children are scarred because of these type of incidents. And it all could have been avoided, let alone the cost of the door. If you look at the video, that whole door frame was destroyed when those police officers destroyed the door and everything when they broke into the home. What kind, and after all, ready for guns blazing. I would say that this doctor needs to be held on some type of legal liability for the extent then of the endangerment of the child because of these entire incidents. The parents themselves could have been put in great danger. In fact, these children could have been parentless had something gone wrong in the invading SWAT team episode. Seriously. I mean, doesn't a mother know their child and what's best for them? Doesn't a mother know when a child is doing good, not doing good, hungry, not hungry, what they really like the most, what they prefer to eat, what they don't like to eat, what it takes to get the child to eat of all different things? But they certainly know when the child is feeling good and not feeling so good because the mother knows their child. And at what point in time when you take these children out of their home, put them in the hands of a foster parents, not that there's a lot of good foster parents out there. I'm not saying that at all, but they don't know that child very well. They've got to learn that child very quickly in order to get up to speed about what it means to take care of that child, let alone that child is upset. He's been taken out of his home, away from his parents. And there's got to be a better plan for that. And you talk about vaccinations. Look what's happening over in a county in New York, where one of the administrators of the county with a police background says, look, hey, we've got a measles epidemic. I think there is some 100 and some measles cases in that county alone. And they did actually come out in that county and said, look, it is more than we understand that the measles came from immigrants coming in. It wasn't because of those that actually live in the county, but because of this is going on, we've got an issue with the unvaccinated. In fact, he said that any child under the age of 18 was banned from public places. That means going to synagogue, going to church, going to school, going to the movie theater, any place like that. They were banned for 30 days. I mean, after all, but how do you know who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated? Are you going to require that everybody that's not vaccinated wear armbands to identify them in the public? Are they going to be shunned by the vaccinated? What type of divisiveness is this creating in the culture? And after all, those that are not vaccinated may not need to be vaccinated because they've actually had the disease, perhaps measles, because you have a lifelong immunity if you've had measles. But this is what happens in the nanny state. This is what happens in the New World Order. It seems like we lose a lot of reason. But these are not isolated incidences. These are things that are going on. We need to be aware of what's going on, because what's the next thing? What is it? Cattle cars? Isolation camps for the nonconformists and those who rebel against the nanny state? Those are some questions. Those are the things we've been looking at. These are just simply signs of the times that we're living in. But it's also certainly this: if you're a parent or grandparent, this might certainly be the time that we take our children out of the public school system, that we take them into the homes, we start homeschooling, and we remove our kids from that government school indoctrination. I mean, these are some thoughts that I have. We did homeschool our son. I think that was the best education that we could have ever given him. And he didn't miss out on anything except a lot of government indoctrination. Well, hey, Nanny State just wants to dumb down the populace, cultivate good citizens, and give us plenty of fluoride so we don't have a lot of fight left in us. Those are just some more thoughts. I just keep coming around to that. But hey, this is something we really need to be aware of and what's going on.
Thank you, John. Our own Mark David Smith starts a new series on should we really trust the ratings from MPAA. And we have Mark's review of a movie that just came out today. What? Is he channeling his movies now? Here's Mark David Smith.
Thanks, Darryl. Mark David Smith. MPAA. Anybody know what these letters stand for? Motion Picture Association of America. If you watch movies, you need to know about the Motion Picture Association of America and their ratings. You need to know what the ratings stand for and then how they rate them. We all have our own standards when it comes to movie. They should follow Torah and Torah standards. But where does Torah standards come in when it comes to watching a movie, right? You know what's in movies. Somebody else's story they want you to see. Their content is based on their morals, their standards, and their ethics. So if you like movies, what do you do to find out whether or not the movie is this movie anywhere close to my standards? In the next few episodes of Four Corners Weekly News, I will attempt to help you find some tips that I use which help me choose the movies I want to see. Hopefully, they will help you too. My tip for this week, go to wikipedia.org and look up MPAA. Read the information and get a head start on what I'll bring next week. Darryl said that I'm going to review a movie that comes out today. Well, March 29th anyway. This episode of Four Corners comes out March 29th, 2019. So since I'm not some famous movie critic that gets free passes to the newest movies before they come out, I have not actually seen this movie yet. The story to this movie does, though, have to do with ratings, and it will be a movie I know I will be recommending because of the content. Do you know who Abby Johnson is? Well, I didn't either until I found this article. Abby Johnson is a former Planned Parenthood abortion facility director who converted to the pro-life cause in 2009. Johnson has exposed numerous details about the inner workings of the abortion industry and now works as a pro-life activist and commentator. This movie is about her complete conversion and how she is taking the story behind the scenes of the world of abortion clinics to the world. The movie is called Unplanned. Once again, comes out March 29th to the theaters. What does this movie have to do with movie ratings? According to the article I found at lifesitenews.com on March 22nd, just a few days ago, it says, many pro-lifers were shocked and confused when the Motion Picture Association of America, remember the MPAA, gave an R rating to the upcoming film about pro-life leader Abby Johnson's conversion story. Now, Johnson is speaking directly to concerned parents to clarify exactly what they can expect in the movie. The MPAA informed the filmmakers last month that they would give the movie an R rating for some disturbing bloody images unless it removes its scenes depicting abortion. The creators refused to change the movie and sent a letter of complaint to MPAA CEO Charles Rivkin. Others have noted that the MPAA MPAA regularly gives PG-13 ratings to movies with vividly violent and sexual content. This is a statement from Abby Johnson explaining the movie. One scene shows what I saw on the ultrasound screen when I assisted in the abortion procedure that convinced me of the humanity of the unborn. You will see what I saw. A baby on an ultrasound screen in black and white 2D. You will see the abortion instrument, which looks like a big straw in real life and like a dark line on the ultrasound introduced onto the screen. You will see the baby struggle against it. You will see the baby first slowly, then quickly disappear into the instrument as it does what it is designed to do. Okay, so we get it. Sounds like shock and awe to me, and I get it if you don't want to see the movie because of these depictions. All I want to do, Mark David Smith, is to present these movies to you and let you decide based on your standards, your ethics, and your morals when it comes to movie. I like being reminded of what goes on in the world. Remember what I said in the movie review for last week. Unless we are versed in the belief system, religion, lifestyle, and culture of the people we're witnessing to or explaining issues like abortion, can we really relate? Mark David Smith. Back to you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Mark, for keeping us up to date on the entertainment industry. In our next news segment, prayer in the name of Jesus is Islamophobic. So says a Pennsylvania Muslim lawmaker. I don't even know how to respond to that statement. I am sure we are all very eager to hear how John Craig responds, though. It's John.
All right, thanks, Darryl. Yes, on the religion news front, what do we got going on? Well, in Pennsylvania, there's a Muslim lawmaker said prayer in the name of Jesus is Islamophobic. Now, of course, here on the Messianic Lamb Network, we do refer to what the church has called Yeshua, or called Jesus. We do call Yeshua, but I am just reading from this article. It's actually from the Washington Standard. Understand, I know the difference here, but this is very interesting, and I've got some thoughts on it as we get through the article. So this is what's happened over in Pennsylvania. There was a state representative, Movita Johnson-Harrell, and she was there to blow the whistle on bigotry and hatred, because Pennsylvania, what happened over in the Pennsylvania State Assembly, yes, the Islamophobia, according to journalist Todd Starnes, was committed by another state representative, Stephanie Borowitz, who prayed this to open a legislative session. Dun, dun, dun. Jesus, you are our only hope. At the name of Jesus, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess, Jesus, that you are Lord. Yes, Yeshua is Lord, and every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that he is Lord. But guess what? There was someone that was very upset about that. Yes, Johnson-Harrell was livid, and she declared that this was highly offensive to me, my guests, and other members of the House. In a statement, she added that the prayers blatantly represented the Islamophobia that exists among some leaders that are supposed to represent the people. I came to the Capitol to help build bipartisanship and collaborations, regardless of race or religion, to enhance the quality of life for everyone in the Commonwealth. Well, Representative Borowitz's prayer may have been inappropriate, this is according to this article, in a setting in which not everyone present was Christian. We have, however, seen many imams say prayers at various legislative bodies that are not non-sectarian, but manifestly Islamic, and even condemning of Jews and Christians, while the non-Muslim lawmakers stand with oblivious heads bowed. but Islamophobic? This illustrates how absurd charge of Islamophobia are. You know what? Just makes me think about something that's been going on. If you remember, if you can recall in the last 30 years or so, that if it wasn't about Islamophobia, if it wasn't just being offensive to Muslims, actually it was being offensive to atheists and agnostics, that no one could ever pray in the name of Yeshua, in the name of Jesus. You couldn't have any type of biblical beliefs, not if you happen to believe that Yeshua was the one and only Messiah. But going on here, it just seems like now it's that the ones that are most offended are the Muslims. Well, let's go on and see what this article talks about. Actually, let's put this in perspective. And I really like how the article actually talks about this, in putting this in perspective. We have seen this before, buried in the concluding paragraphs of a Christmas Eve 2018 Washington Times report about Muslims in Uganda forcing Christians to convert to Islam, was the extraordinary revelation that in that country, Muslims now consider any public statement of the Christian faith to be calculated insult to Muslims, for which they can justifiably exact revenge. In June, the Times reported a group of Muslims attacked Christian preachers in eastern Uganda during a crusade where Christians publicly profess their faith and invite others to join. Muslims in the town accused the Christians of mocking Islam by publicly saying Jesus, or Yeshua, was the Son of God. And going on here, so the Christians appealed to the Muslims to have respect for those of other faith. The Muslims responded with contempt. One Muslim, Abu Bakr Yusuf, declared, "We have now declared a jihad against them. We are not going to allow anyone to despise Islamic teachings at their church or crusade. We will seek revenge." How did the Christians despise Islamic teachings? By preaching aspects of Christianity, such as the divinity of Christ, that Islam denies. The Christians, knowing how to delicate their situation, or how delicate their situation was, would never have dreamed of actually saying something critical about Islam itself. But to the Muslims who heard them, just enunciating the tenets of their Christian faith was criticism enough, and they refused to stand for it. I want you to understand that we are encapsulating the very arguments that Islam has been making in Germany and France and Great Britain and Sweden, around the world. They've been saying in Muslim countries for years, and with the spread of Islam moving further and further down into Africa, we are actually understanding why they will go through and destroy an entire village, churches with people inside, burning the churches and locking their doors, slaying the men and raping the women and taking their children off as hostages. We can see why they are doing that, because of the basic tenets of the Christian faith. And I will say that no one is immune if they are outside of the Islamic belief system. Well, taking that into perspective, that incident and now Johnson Herald's Islamophobia charge are or should be sobering news for the comfortable Christians of the West who have made an idol out of interfaith dialogue. Have you heard that before? Yes, especially with the thoughts of Chrislam and how Christianity and Islam are just so much alike and how they serve the same God. Well, I was going to call it a name that I probably shouldn't at this point in time, but basically they're wrong. And it says, and fastidiously avoid saying anything remotely critical about Islam, even as the Muslim persecution of Christians continues worldwide. Perhaps that's why there's such boldness even rising out when someone, even in these state assemblies, are willing to make such charges. Is there not going to be someone that will stand up and say, no, you have your own phobias, and you are trying to force your belief system on us, we will not stand for that. But moving right along, we've got to keep in mind that this is the slow progression of the takeover of Islam that's been taking place in the Western countries for years. And that's why they say that France right now is on the verge of becoming the very first European Muslim nation. Movita Johnson Harrell has now provided more proof that this was correct by calling Borowitz's prayer Islamophobic. She is in effect saying that the public expression of Christian faith mocks Islam and despises Islamic teachings. Well, here's a little bit more fire to stir the pot, or a little bit more heat on the fire, should I say. It says when it comes to it, that it's most likely the exact same thing that those Christians will do. It's already beginning. Pennsylvania House Minority Whip Jordan Harris, a Democrat, of course, stated, "Let me be clear. I'm a Christian. I spend my Sunday mornings in church worshiping and being thankful for all that I have. But in no way does that mean I would flaunt my religion at those who worship differently than I do. There's no room in our Capitol building for action such as this." And it's incredibly disappointing that today's opening prayer was so divisive. I want to ask, is Jordan Harris really a believer? Does he really believe, if he says he's a Christian, that would seem to say that he would believe that Yeshua would be the Messiah? Well, I want to say, then how about this? So Harris says that Christians must not flaunt their religions. Not coincidentally, that is exactly what Islamic law says about Christians, that they should carry on their worship quietly behind closed doors and never make public display of it. Oh, and by the way, speaking of flaunting one's religion, Movita Johnson Harrell wears a hijab. Harris is not on record objecting to that kind of flaunting one's religion. So this is what we need to understand in regards of the Islamification of the U.S. It's well underway. And when Christians lose their voice, then when will there be any other voice? Or if they lose their voice, there's no other voices out there. I mean, just look at Lebanon. Lebanon used to be a Christian nation in the Middle East. What about France, Sweden, and England? I think these are some things we need to consider, especially if we call ourselves believers and that we follow the great commission of Yeshua, that we are to go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. If we are to actually go out there with a voice, perhaps we could push back this flood that is entering into our nation here in the United States. If you're in other nations, you know very well what I'm talking about, especially when the news is being silenced, is being censored around the world. We're losing that voice. We're losing our freedoms. We need to make sure that we don't lose them here in the United States. I think we are the last vestige of freedom of speech.
Thank you, John. Just another segment in the world has completely gone crazy. Jalapenos, or jalapenos as they're sometimes called, are now being called the anti-cancer food. It looks as though they strip away the defenses of cancer cells. We always like to finish with an encouraging story. Hard to get more encouraging than something that strips away the defenses of cancer cells. Here's John Craig with the hot story.
On a good note here in the health news, I like this article, anti-cancer food. Jalapenos strip away the defenses of cancer cells. I like that. This is taken from naturalnews.com, written by David Gutierrez. Get this. It's an article that talks about the chemical that gives jalapenos and other hot peppers their burn may have powerful anti-cancer effects. Research continues to show. So what does it show? Well, the chemical capsaicin is effective in shrinking tumors in a variety of cancer types. Some of the most detailed research has been performed on prostate cancer. In this cancer, capsaicin appears to strip away some of the defenses that cancer cells use to prevent themselves from dying. It also regulates the activity of androgen receptors in prostate tumors, preventing cancers from using male sex hormones to fuel their growth. So researchers found that when mice with prostate cancer were treated with capsaicin, programmed cell death was triggered in 80% of their cancer cells. So the dose used in the study was roughly equivalent to a 200-pound human adult eating 3 to 8, yes, I said 3 to 8, but wait for it, fresh habanero peppers 3 times a week. Yes, 3 times a week. Habaneros contain roughly 50 times the capsaicin concentration of jalapenos. Under the Schofield Heat Index, they are ranked at a burn of 300,000 Schofield units compared to only 2,500 to 5,000 for a jalapeno. Peppers, not pills. So if you like peppers, so it sounds like some great health benefits here. Capsaicin prevents the lysosomal damage that plays a key role in lung cancer development. Another study found that highly malignant human breast cancer cells treated with capsaicin for 24 hours died. The higher the dose, the more cancer cells killed. So most skin cancer cells exposed to capsaicin die. And then another study found that highly metastatic melanoma cells in the presence of capsaicin are less likely to migrate to other parts of the body. So these are some really good things, some very interesting things about eating peppers. And when you mix capsaicin with gingerol, which is found in ginger, the cancer-fighting effect was particularly potent. One major flaw of the studies, of course there's always a flaw, is their focus on the isolated chemical capsaicin. Whole foods such as chili peppers always contain many more health-boosting nutrients that can be found in any single component chemical. So, well, I don't know about you, but when I have one little bite of a habanero pepper, I'm done. All of my taste buds are done for that entire meal. I'm on fire and my mouth is scorched. It seems like for an eternity. But you know, hey, what's 3 to 8 habanero peppers 3 times a week? Who needs taste buds after all? But I think I would prefer maybe a whole food concentrate version as a supplement. But hey, I'm just sweating thinking about it.
Thank you, John. All of us will be now spicing up our lives a little with a little bit of jalapeno. Well, thank you for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the Messianic Lamb Network YouTube channel. And for all information about shows, broadcasts, show hosts, producers, schedules, what's coming up, what's going down, what's getting back up again, anything and everything you wanted to know about the Lamb Video Network, go to MessianicLambRadio.com. As a side note, there's a new website on its way. I've been given a preview, and I think it is very slick. The new website should be up and running by the 1st of next week. Donate as you are able to. Sign up for the bi-monthly email updates. I'm Rabbi Darryl Weinberg. You've been watching the Four Corners Weekly News on the Lamb Video Network. Have a great and restful Shabbat and Shavua Tov. God bless.